Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, the Master of Fun and Wonder, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am here with the latest episode number 241 of Robservations, the show about something. And I want to welcome you, all of you members of this, the imagination connoisseur community of the Post-Geek Singularity world. I didn't quite get that right. Let me say that again. You imagination connoisseurs who make up this, the Post-Geek Singularity community for Robservations number 241. And I got to say, I want to start this show by just saying I am so gosh darn proud of y'all. I have found, of course, my live chat on Friday was about my reactions to the Joker. And I just want to say that people have agreed with me, people who have disagreed with me. I have received such insightful and interesting commentary from many of you. And really, again, it makes me realize why I do these shows in the first place. This community that we're building, the discourse that is happening, it makes it all worthwhile. And I so very much enjoy that. And I want to thank you all for that because you all have a hand in it. I think we're setting the tone here when other people perhaps are not. I think we're doing it. We're elevating the discourse. We're showing people, we're setting the tone. We're showing people what fandom can be. We can disagree with one another, but we can disagree in cogent, erudite fashion, and it makes it a joy. It makes it a joy to be here, sort of leading the charge. As John Campy had called me, I guess I really am the existential Mr. Rogers, but I couldn't be if it wasn't for all of you. Anyway, speaking of that, the Joker is smashing records, ladies and gentlemen. $93.5 million this weekend, a new opening record for the month of October overseas. It did $140.5 million from more than 70 markets without opening in China, for a global haul of $234 million after one weekend. This, of course, shatters the previous October opening record for another R-rated movie. Or no, Venom wasn't R. Was Venom R-rated? But Venom opened to $80.3 million last October, which set a record. Joker smashed that record by $13 million, which just goes to show that there is a market for adult-minded comic book-derived movies that do not cost in excess of $150 million. By all reports, Joker was made for $60 million, maybe. And of course, you add marketing to that. Either way, an epic win for Warner Brothers, an epic win for Walter Hamada, who took over, who is steering the ship, who is steering the DC franchise films in a certain direction. And he has certainly been doing a fantastic job. Audiences did give the film a B+ on CinemaScore, which is considered soft. The Rotten Tomato rating is at 69%. But you know what? If there's one thing this movie has that it just delights me to no end, is to see just how many people have so many different opinions about it. I can't remember the last time people were having such discussion about a film. And I think that's the most important thing of all. This movie is engaging people. People are, I was talking to Elizabeth about this. Last night, I went and saw a production of Sam Shepard's True West that I'd never seen before. It's a favorite play of actors everywhere, especially, I was told last night, if you were a Chicago actor. I'd never seen the play, and there was a great, at the Versus Theater here in town, my friend David Starzyk was in it. David Starzyk, who, if you haven't seen the latest season of Veronica Mars, he plays Big Dick Casablancas, and his fate in the new season of Veronica Mars was, shall we say, unique. But I went and saw him. He was terrific. All the actors were terrific. If you're in LA and you want to see a great play, the Versus Theater, I think it's Friday, Saturday nights, Sam Shepard's True West, check it out. Really, really good. So on the way to the play, Elizabeth and I were talking, and I was explaining to her, I was saying that, one of the things that's really interesting is that I inhabit this YouTube pundit world, and I'm old. I'll flat out say it. Like I'm one of the elder statesmen, and I don't mean that like I'm some founding father, although perhaps you could say I am. But there's not a lot of people working in the YouTube punditry space that is necessarily as old as I am. But that means that I grew up watching a lot of movies that were new, that a lot of my fellow pundits uh, saw after they had come out. You know, like I was there. I was afforded the opportunity to see Star Wars first run and see not only the effect it had on myself and my peers, but culture at large. And I watched what we went through a renaissance of fantasy filmmaking, and indeed filmmaking. Again, famously, the 70s was we saw the toppling of the studio system in the late 60s, but in the 70s, sort of a renaissance of films, beginning with movies like Easy Rider. The director became the auteur. Many books have been written. Easy Riders and what, Raging Bulls, or I forget the Peter Biskin book. Check that out. But so I was telling her, I was saying, you know, that a lot of the people that I know, a lot of fans and imagination connoisseurs, they haven't seen Taxi Driver and they haven't seen King of Comedy. And as much as I can sit there and go, oh my God, Todd Phillips shamelessly borrows from those films, there's a lot of people who just haven't seen them. So when they are coming to Joker, they're encountering certain their feelings and portrayals and things that are new and fresh to them. And you can't go back. I mean, whenever you're going to go back in history and try and watch classic films, you might have heard, yes, these movies are classic. If you're a newly minted imagination connoisseur, or if you are younger, you know, you can't be expected to go back and immediately recognize the genius of a movie that's 45 years old. You know, you go back and you watch a Taxi Driver, it was definitely a movie of its time, which means it was, even the film stock it was shot on looks very different than the movies of today. So there are levels of perception that you have to get through before you can even watch and enjoy an older film. And I'm keenly aware of that. And it's something that I think that you know, I'm get off my lawn. You have to go back and watch all those classic films. I'm all about that. But as I've said, if you've grown up in a world where Jurassic Park already existed and you get photorealistic CG dinosaurs that are absolutely convincing, it is very difficult to go back and watch Ray Harryhausen stop motion animation movies from the 50s. As much as I dearly love Earth versus the Flying Saucers, when you're watching flying saucers that were stop motion animated, it's just really hard when you live in a world where you can also watch Independence Day. Now, I'm not saying that Taxi Driver is necessarily as dated as Earth versus the Flying Saucers, but I understand if you're 25 or 30 and you've never experienced King of Comedy, or, hey, Gilbert, oh, something's going on. But if you've never seen King of Comedy and you've never seen never seen Taxi Driver, can you please stop, Gilbert? Come on, buddy. I'm trying to do a show. Of course, it wouldn't be a show if Gilbert and Tallulah didn't bark for some reason. A lot of activity going on today. It's Zoe Trope's 19th birthday. There's people coming over, but I'm here talking to you. Anyway, you can't be expected to go back and watch a film with the same eyes as you would if you saw it when it was brand new, because so much has happened from since then. I mean, you know, if you're 25 or 30, you've watched Goodfellas, you've watched Casino, you might have seen Color of Money. Martin Scorsese, you've made The Departed, where he won the best picture that year. When you go back and you look at Taxi Driver and you consider, oh my God, it's a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece, but it's also a movie that's a product of its time. And things that are products of their time, they change. And the fact that we've had pop culture that has now existed, we imagination connoisseurs, Star Wars is now 42 years old. It's going on half a century. Star Trek is 53 years old. So even that you've heard me rail beyond, I rail about Star Trek all the time and what it means and where it's gone. Throughout literally my entire life, Star Trek has grown and evolved. It's become something different to each generation of people. And that's why I've said, for as much as I dislike Star Trek Discovery, I'm keenly aware that it's going to be the first Star Trek a lot of viewers encounter for the very first time. And for me to sit there and say, hey, you don't know what Star Trek is unless you go back and watch the original series, which I actually believe. But I also understand if you've come to Star Trek for the very first time because of Star Trek Discovery, I cannot expect you to go back and watch the original series and have it affect you the same way that it affected me as a young child growing up in the 70s. It just isn't going to. There's things about it that immediately are going to throw up walls. The visual effects, the lighting, the set design, the way people look, hairstyles, the way people act. I mean, you can't expect it to be, and I'm keenly aware of it. My experience with Star Trek is very different than somebody who's, say, 20, who's in college and starts watching Discovery for the very first time. And if they enjoy Discovery, what do they need some, gray-haired, middle-aged dude with one foot in the grave telling them why they're wrong for liking Star Trek Discovery? You can't do that. And I think one of the things that, even though I do all the time, but I do recognize probably not the best way to go. And it isn't fair. If somebody likes something, you can't tell them they don't like it or they shouldn't like it. They like it. And we as imagination connoisseurs, we live in a world of riches because remember, every year there's even more stuff to watch and enjoy. And certainly that brings me, we got Joker coming out. Who would have thought anybody would have ever made a Joker movie, whether you liked Joker or not, whether you've seen King of Comedy and Taxi Driver or not? Isn't it amazing that a major studio spent tens of millions of dollars on a Joker film that is ultimately one Debbie Downer of a film? It's not like you walk out of Joker and feel elated because the world is a wonderful place. I'm ecstatic that Warner Brothers and Walter Hamada and Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix and everybody involved with the production of Joker got this movie made, put out by a major studio, and it's clocking some serious dollars. I mean, that's amazing. It's a win for everybody. It's a win for imagination connoisseurs. It's a win for everybody that loves comic book films because it really has expanded, like Logan, hell, like Guardians of the Galaxy. They're all expanding what comic book movies can be in very different directions. And they are based on superhero comics. You don't have to sit there and go, well, Ghost World is also based on a comic book, and so is American Splendor, and yes, Road to Perdition and History of Violence. I get it. I understand all that. That's great too. But to see the superhero genre that for a very long time had a certain perception in both Hollywood and viewers' minds has been blown out of the water. It continues to evolve, and it's pretty great. Now, I bet you're all wondering, am I going to bring that same kind of optimistic appraisal of the situation to Star Trek? Well, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings of all persuasions, beliefs, sexualities, genders, as we all know, the New York Comic Con was this weekend. There were big doings. There was a big Star Trek panel, but most importantly, they dropped a short take. You got to see Spock in number one. Not really a great depiction of Spock, but I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to talk about the two big things that happened at this panel. They dropped the first trailer for Star Trek Discovery Season 3 and a pretty epic trailer for Star Trek Picard. Now, if you haven't seen these trailers, I would suggest you go see them. We see, once again, not only Data, but we see Data in his old Next Generation uniform. Look, there's already people bitching that the uniforms aren't exact. Look, I get it. Okay, but I'll go with that. It's fine. It's clearly a dream or a holodeck simulation. We don't know, but it's clearly something like that. Riker and Troy are back living, I guess, perhaps in Alaska, where Riker is from. They've got kids. And I have to say that both Star Trek trailers, both Star Trek Discovery's trailer and Star Trek Picard's trailer, show that we are getting very lavishly produced Star Trek. Clearly, I mean, Discovery, for all of its myriad of faults, Star Trek Discovery is a very expensive show. As we've frequently talked about here and also other channels, it could very well be not only the most expensive Star Trek show ever made, it's one of the most expensive television shows ever produced, ever. For better or for worse. As I've always said, mostly for worse. But Star Trek Picard looks to be even more expensive and more expansive. We learned that Star Trek Picard absolutely, it was no secret to anybody who's paying attention, Star Trek Picard absolutely refers back to both Star Trek 09 that Alex Kurtzman co-wrote and the canonical Countdown comic book that he also wrote, well, had a hand in writing, that was set in the Next Generation era, and you saw the series of events that led to the Narada, a mining ship that used Borg technology. All of this is very important when it comes to the new Picard series. The Narada, Nero's ship, they didn't really get into this in the movie, but they certainly did in the Countdown comic. The Narada was a fusion of Romulan and Borg technology, which in the Countdown comic, Kurtzman and Orci definitely had the idea that the Romulans were using and exploiting Borg technology. So this is not a new idea. This is something that they actually put forth in the Countdown comic back in 2009. Now, there is a YouTube channel. I love promoting other YouTubers, by the way, because I watch other people's work. So why wouldn't I? If you haven't subscribed to the Popcast, they've got 21,000 subscribers. You should subscribe, but not before subscribing to my podcast. Subscribe to Robservations, subscribe to the Burnettwork, and please visit the website, theburnettwork.net. We got a lot of people coming and going. It's great. If you like these chats, please hit like. But the Popcast on October 4th, Friday, dropped a very interesting video. Now, we know from the Picard trailers, there is a mysterious woman, a young woman named Daj. We've been told her name is Daj. They have a video saying that Picard has a daughter, and you'll never guess how that happened. I would recommend everyone watch that video. It's very informative. I really like the guys at the Popcast. I really like their videos. They also did a really great video that I would recommend everybody watch about how the Expanse was saved. I watched it with Elizabeth. We watched it. I'd seen it before, but we watched it again this morning. I tell you, seldom do YouTube videos bring a tear to my eye, but watch the Popcast's video about how the Expanse was saved. And I'll tell you, it will bring a tear to your eye. But anyway, so not only do we have Kurtzman and Orci putting forth the idea that the Romulans were using Borg technology 10 years ago, but here's something else, and something I found, and I don't know, I cannot verify this, but I will say how I learned this. One of my favorite Star Trek novelists is David Mack. David Mack, I've always supported him. I always tweet about his books. If you haven't read his Star Trek, if you love Star Trek The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, you owe it to yourself to read one of the most epic Star Trek trilogies ever written, David Mack's Destiny trilogy. It's amazing. It also is about the Borg. But David Mack was tweeting that his friend, Star Trek novelist Kirsten Beyer, who has written 10 Star Trek Voyager novels, 10, ladies and gentlemen. She's also written Buffy tie-in fiction, but her novels are basically post-Voyager series novels, and they're all great. She's a terrific Star Trek novelist. Why is this important? Kirsten Beyer was on the writing staff of Star Trek Discovery. I am sure she was marginalized, but David Mack said something, and I'd heard this before, that Kirsten Beyer was one of the people that put forward the idea of the Picard series. Now, of course, we know that Brian Fuller first approached Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart about doing a Picard series years ago that was really an offshoot of the Countdown comic and what was going on, canonical Star Trek. But Kirsten Beyer, keep in mind, 10 Star Trek Voyager novels. Kirsten Beyer knows more about Star Trek than everyone else who's working on Star Trek Discovery, or probably Picard. David Mack, yesterday, she was going to come and sign her book at the New York Comic Con, Architects of Infinity. Now, he tweeted out that she is the co-creator of Star Trek Picard. Now, until the show, I guess, airs, we will not know whether or not, like, what the official titles are. I don't know if Kirsten Beyer is, in fact, canonically, more contractually, is she the co-creator of the Picard series? That's a huge deal. It's a huge deal for many reasons, most of which is you have a Star Trek author and a huge Star Trek fan, probably the biggest Star Trek fan steeped in Star Trek lore, who had a hand in creating Star Trek Picard. The involvement of Seven of Nine. Obviously, we know that Star Trek Picard leans very heavily into Borg technology, and whether the Romulans are weaponizing Borgs. Have they taken the technology and are they creating their own race of Borgs to use? They've lost their homeworld because of the supernova, as we saw in Star Trek 09. So it makes sense. We know that I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but there's a lot going on. Now, the Popcast video, I'll give you a basic summation, but what they do is they even go back and they posit a number of things. They have a reason why Captain Picard was cloned, as we found out in Star Trek Nemesis, and why Daj, this mysterious girl from that we've seen in both trailers, might very well be a hybrid of the Borg Queen and Picard himself. And it also ties back in to Tasha Yar, the Tasha Yar from yesterday's Enterprise, who went back into the past, which allowed the Romulans to understand why they had to clone Jean-Luc Picard in the first place. There's a lot to unpack, but I'll let you discover all that more on your own by watching that Popcast video. But as I was thinking about this, I'd watched the Popcast video before I'd seen the trailer. I'm like, this all feels like a Star Trek novel to me. I'm like, there is no way that the writing staff that we've seen from Star Trek Discovery, many people like Akiva Goldsman or Alex Kurtzman, could ever have come up with the kind of story that Picard seems to be very close to showing us. Only Kirsten Beyer could have come up with a lot of that stuff. I mean, I'm sure she had lots of help, but the more than ever before, when I watched this Picard new trailer, the new Picard trailer, which had a lot to like in it, I'm not going to lie. I really liked the Picard trailer. I liked what I saw. I liked the fact it felt like what it's like to read a great Star Trek novel, like the Reeve Stevens, for instance. You want to read a great novel? Read their novel Federation, which is a combination of Kirk and Picard meeting, way better than Generations. Read one of the greatest Star Trek stories ever written in their novel Prime Directive. People want to know, why do I like reading Star Trek novels so much? Because the best of them are incredible Star Trek stories that dive deep into Star Trek mythology. If nothing else, Star Trek Picard looks to be a deep dive into Star Trek mythology. It's going to have elements from Star Trek 09, elements from Voyager, elements from Next Generation, obviously. And I have to say, I think it's the most excited I've been for new Star Trek since I can't remember when. I was never a big fan of what they were doing with Star Trek 09. I was asked to be part of a small group to watch 20 minutes of Star Trek 09 months before it opened, and I left the theater wanting to become a boxer just because there was people I wanted to hit in the face, and I wanted to know how to do it. That's how I felt the first time I saw 20 minutes on the Paramount lot, no less. But this has me excited, not just because I spent 3 years making Star Trek The Next Generation documentaries, but because it looks like somebody put a lot of thought into this show. Now, that said, That doesn't mean it's not going to suck. But I will say this, as I do with everything, I don't want anything to suck. Making movies and television is way, way, way too hard. And you know what? Nobody sets out to make a bad film. Nobody sets out to make a bad television series. They don't. But you know what? I've also said making movies and television is like alchemy. It's like Rumpelstiltskin spinning straw into gold. It's magic, and it doesn't always work. Even with the best intentions and the most talented people, there is an element of magic. There is an element of alchemy that exists in making motion pictures. And you can have the best people with the best intentions, and they come out with something that's, well, less than the best. And but I have to say that it looks like this show certainly is lavish. There is a lot of, I don't believe necessarily in fan service. I mean, what people call fan service, I call that's somebody paying attention. You know, there can be too much of that. It can. I've always said if you're too much of a canonista, you can weigh down your own programming by spending too much time delving into the past. You can get bogged down with that. It doesn't look to me. Look, they should have the Enterprise D hologram hanging from Starfleet headquarters. Why not? You know, I didn't like the idea they're using Romulan ships from the original series. I'm like, you know, where's the Derridax class Warbird? I talked about this before. I would like to, the Next Generation had one of the greatest Romulan designs ever, and they were used in Deep Space Nine. Why not bring that back? I understand. I mean, I'm supposed to be like, oh, great. Maybe they're mothballed, but those ships would be over 100 years old. Who's still flying those things? I don't know. Be that as it may, the Picard series, at least judging from this trailer, we got Riker and Troy. You know, we got Data. There's a lot to love about this trailer, and I have to say, I'm very excited about it. We shall see. You know, if Seven of Nine's going all John Woo, going all Chow Yun Fat with dual laser blasters, Borg, whatever she's got, if she's now an avenging angel of death, hey, if it's done well, if it's well written, and I'm hoping that with Kirsten Beyer having created the show, this gives me hope, ladies and gentlemen, that somebody like her, who's written 10 very good Star Trek novels, has had a huge hand in creating the show. Because why not? Wouldn't it be great? I mean, Michael Chabon can bring his Pulitzer Prize winning acumen toward character development and things like that. The Picard show, by all stretches of the imagination, has two authors that are the architects of what we're seeing. And that, my friends, that excites me, which is very exciting. Before I move on to Discovery, let's see if anybody has anything to say. And you do. Jet Screamer is here. Seen RHPS in the theater. New fans don't know the fun. RHPS. What is that? I'm not sure what RHPS is. I'm probably being stupid because I got Star Trek on the brain. But new fans don't know the fun. What is RHPS? I know it's probably stupid, but I should know. Willow Yang is here. Willow Yang says, I just rewatched Taxi Driver in preparation for Joker. What's your interpretation of the ending? Did he survive the shootout? I think he did. I think he did survive the shootout. Because yes, I do. But I don't want to get into why I think that he survived the shootout. But if you haven't seen Taxi Driver, you got to see Taxi Driver. If you liked Joker, you've got to watch Taxi Driver. It's an amazing film that I think is actually a much better film than the Joker, even though it's covering the same ground. Adam Wolford is here. Adam Wofford. What if in Next Generation there was a cult of people that worshiped the Borg as a perfect version of evolution and try to bring them to your side of the galaxy? That could be good. All of those kinds of things are very much science fiction tropes. It's like the mutants in Beneath the Planet of the Apes that worship the Alpha, the Omega bomb. Their god was a doomsday device, and okay, I could see that people could worship the Borg as like the ultimate form of evolution. Unfortunately, as long as they, yes, the answer is that could be. I don't necessarily think. I think the way they're going to go is over the weekend that they talked about the Star Trek Picard series is going to have an overarching idea of immigration. As I've always said, the best Star Trek is allegorical. They use the prism of a science fiction fantasy adventure show to tell stories about our world today. And if they're going to deal with the fact that the Romulans have lost their homeworld, they are looking, or a faction of them anyway, are looking to exploit Borg technology to once again assure dominance of the Alpha Quadrant, or Beta Quadrant, or the Delta Quadrant, the whole galaxy, let's face it. If that's what they're looking to do, interesting. I mean, what if immigration today, why are there people massing at our southern border? Because they're fleeing the horrible violence and persecution and corruption they suffer in their homeland. They're coming to America for a better life. This idea that people are immigrating to the United States because they want to take over the U.S. and subvert our life is ridiculous. They want to find a better life. They want to join the American quilt and bring something. Mostly they want to take care of themselves and their families. That's why they immigrate here. And for the most part, especially if you live in Southern California, you see our large immigrant community here is a vital part of what makes Southern California Southern California. And if the new Star Trek show is going to address these issues in Star Trek Picard, I say more power to you. I think that's good stuff. Now, I've got, as you all know, I love reading letters, and boy, do I have a couple of great letters. I'm going to start off reading this one. This letter, I have to say, comes from Sean Daniel. Very, very interesting letter. And you know what I got to do is, when I finish this letter, I'm going to, I'll cut and paste the link he sent, and I'll put it in the chat so you can find it. But here is he refers to an article called Star Trek Discovery and Philosophical Conservatism. And I guess he wrote that article. So, wait, I guess this is the article he wrote. But I'm going to read it anyway because I like this. This is certainly not a new story, and the debate has been had for much of the history of the human condition. I have a really hard time not engaging with the bad hot takes from Star Trek Discovery supporters and defenders. There is this commonality that they all seem to put forth that makes many assumptions that I think we should all be wary of allowing without debate. Philosophical conservatism is an ideology based on the notion that society cannot operate without a ruling class presiding over the populace. The notion that monarchy and aristocracy are not only necessary, but without them, society would simply fall into chaos. That people are wholly incapable of self-governance and should be told what to do and how to live. Star Trek Discovery has become a divided issue within the Star Trek community. And in its defense, we see common traits with philosophical conservatism, gatekeeping, and an absolutist position on canonical determination is being made constantly. The argument is simply that the IP holder determines canon, and that you have no choice but to accept this as fact. Regardless of opinion or argument to the contrary, and there are many great arguments to the contrary, the use of this position simply brushes away all arguments as inconsequential or fictitious without even engaging them in debate. The dynamics of authority and authority hierarchy in such argumentation are clear. There is a single authority, and no other persons can be allowed to make decisions as to the reality they exist within. This is a monarchist, absolutist position. However, let's look at how reality actually works. Intellectual property is interesting when you examine large bodies of people holding a common vision and a dream. In this case, the greater Star Trek universe, and the common version and perception of it that the community agrees upon. This could be called canon. Canon is not simply an arbitrary and dictated position. We know this because we all watched as George Lucas discovered that his own vision of canon and the vision of canon that fandom held were two very different animals. And ultimately, he lost because he was not and could not be a gatekeeper. The sheer force of numbers in the community easily and without much resistance overpowered him. So the question persists. Why do the people defending Star Trek Discovery feel the need to use ultimate authority to overcome criticism without engagement? When there is no evidence to support their or the IP holder's rights to such an arbitrary and absolutist position, especially as it has become widely apparent that the community at large ultimately has the final say in what is and what is not considered canon, as has been previously proven through their own force of will. Should this type of argumentation be accepted, or should we rise up and challenge it? I would argue that even the remotest concept of allowing this type of gatekeeping and absolutism would be irreparably damaging to the many fantasy universes franchises we hold dear, and should not be allowed to continue without a fight. I know that aggression and anger towards these attacks is difficult to do without seeming callous and mean, but as a diehard leftist with a serious penance for the liberty of the individual to determine their own fate, yes, that's right, conservatism is actually the opposite of this, contrary to the belief of the uneducated and the ill-informed, I cannot stand and watch as authority is presumed and held over me, as if I, an individual, am incapable of holding my own opinions, or that these opinions are somehow invalid because such authority can simply say so. An aside, the reason for the correlation. Yes, this is meant to make a comparison that is otherwise not entirely necessary. However, in the times we live, I feel as though it is necessary to teach those who would fall into false assumptions of authority and false assumptions of social and political identity, to teach them why gatekeeping and absolutism are inherently bad for society, and why the ideals of a ruling class and ruling elites can easily become tyrannical and oppressive to the things we hold dear. To assume that your opinion should be the only opinion, and as much should be enforced, is to be the conservative oppressor. Anyone making such arguments can identify themselves any way they want, but call them what they are: philosophical conservatives, authoritarians. You also need to realize that attacking other marginalized and minority groups' identities is authoritarian and conservative. So finding yourself being opposed when you are attacking means you are in the wrong, and they are actually the freedom fighters. You are the oppressor, and your opinion is less than. Respect individualism even when you don't like it. It ain't none of your business. Do not confuse this with social conservatism. It is the conflation and intentional confusion over terminology that brings people to false identity and ignorant positions as much. Social conservatism is the notion that societal change is unwanted, the status quo ante, and as you have figured out, to oppose the forced change to canon of which Star Trek Discovery is imposing, love this, is a socially conservative position, but it is also a leftist position against authority and hierarchy, while the imposition by Discovery is actually philosophically conservative or authoritarian. I see the ex-Gamergate and alt-right community, and before I see misogyny, bigotry, and racism, I see leftists being led down a false path. They seek freedom and liberty, and they find radicalization into hate because they don't understand the identities being presented, and it is in that misunderstanding that they can be misled and deceived by far more egregious ideologies. Once they begin to parrot the hot takes and ignorant rhetoric, which closely aligns with the hate, they become reviled. And so the negative reinforcement feedback loop begins. The only place they can find peace is in the hands of the haters. Rinse and repeat, and they become the haters. The path to radicalization can only be stopped by education and understanding. The hand of knowledge held out to those who might still be willing to accept it. I do believe that this represents the majority and not the minority, but so few offer such a hand that it basically seems to not exist. Don't be fooled by false rhetoric. Become knowledgeable enough to identify misleading speech. Read books, learn definitions of and context, literal and historical. You are not a minority because of your opinions. You are a minority because you have been isolated and cornered by false identities and the ideologically dangerous who have put you there under false pretenses. This is specific to not only philosophical, political, or chosen identities. Blame and anger happen as an effect, not as a cause. Beware the false dichotomy. It is a weapon to deceive you, and it is very effective. Viva leftism, viva la resistance. Now, I know that was a little heady. But it was about Star Trek Discovery, and I love what he was trying to say. That said, I hate Star Trek Discovery. I hate it with every fiber of my being, but I watch every episode. And every episode, I sit there and I think to myself, first of all, I'm going to put this link to this article. If you want to, there it is. I put it in the chat. You can find it. I want to thank Sean for sending that article in. Let me see if anybody's saying anything more, because I love you guys. I get the best. I get the best letters. I get the best commentary. I'm convinced this is the best community on YouTube. It might be small. It's growing every day, but not exactly by leaps and bounds, which is why if you hit like and if you would subscribe, that would be good. But I have to say, I do love all of you out there for bringing me this kind of material. It's certainly not what you get at any other YouTube channel that talks basically about Star Trek, superhero movies, comics, whatever. And I thank you all for that. That dude says, if you like subpoena coladas and getting caught in Ukraine, bum, ba-dum, bum. That's very funny. Very, very funny. I do. I enjoy that. But anyway, so in addition to the Picard trailer, the Star Trek Discovery Season 3 trailer did, in fact, drop. Now, I'm going to address something that has come up. It was on Twitter today, and I further addressed it. And I also addressed it on our Post-Geek Singularity page on Facebook. And I will tell you a story for those of you who don't know the story. Back in 2005, I was working on Superman Returns. I was creating what was later became a documentary, a 3-hour documentary on the production of the film called Requiem for Krypton, Making Superman Returns. It's on the Blu-ray. So I'd been friends with Bryan Singer since film school. I'd known him for years and years, and this was actually the 4th documentary that I was doing for him after The Usual Suspects and X-Men and X2. And I had been in Sydney, Australia for a year covering the production, and we were in Seattle, my hometown of Seattle, where Chris McQuarrie, who's now directing the Mission Impossible movies, was living. Chris McQuarrie, of course, won an Academy Award for writing Usual Suspects. So Chris McQuarrie, Bryan Singer, and I were having dinner. We were in Madison Park. We were having a very sake-soaked sushi dinner that went on for a very long time. And I finally said to them, I go, with Enterprise ending and the Berman era of Star Trek ending, we should team up and pitch a new Star Trek. And with Bryan directing, Chris writing, and I would be on as a consulting producer, what was not to love? And they're like, yeah, man, we should do that. So I pitched them this idea that I said, one of the great successes of Star Trek: The Next Generation was that it was 80 years plus after the original series. So you could have familiar things, but it was changed. And I said, what if we used history as an example? And what if we were to leap much further into the future? And I had said, let's go to the year 3000. Basically, I was thinking, 1,000 years, but 600 years after Next Gen, but a huge leap into the future. And my idea was that the United Federation of Planets then would have been around for centuries, and things had changed in the galaxy. Vulcans and Romulans, they had reunified. The Klingons had a reformation, and they were more like the Tang Dynasty Chinese. They were more like warrior mystics. The Bajorans had become communal with the prophets, the wormhole aliens. The Ferengi had become far more important because they had been able to make capitalism, their brand of capitalism, spread across the galaxy. And everything was different. And what the Federation was sort of old, and it was outmoded, and it was spread across the entire galaxy. They hadn't manufactured a new starship in hundreds of years. And basically they were just trying to keep the peace, and everything was sort of different. And all of our familiar players were very different. But the Federation was falling apart, basically, because of age and the fact that there was no the age of exploration had sort of ended, and the Federation was crumbling. And I was kind of thinking about it like ancient Rome, but not because of the corruption, but it was just old. And therein lies our tale. We end up meeting. We have a new bunch of characters. There was a character we called Alexander Kirk, who was a very, 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 very obviously distant, maybe distant relative of James T. Kirk. And a situation arose, and the Federation was going to build a new Starship Enterprise. It was going to be the first starship that was built in hundreds of years, and because of various events. Now, you can go read this if you go to the Facebook page, the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page. We called the series Star Trek Federation. And I got Star Trek novelist and television writer Jeff Thorne to take these ideas. I threw these ideas out, very rough sketches. I mean, the outline, and he wrote up a document. I wrote the opening of it, and then I added a bunch of stuff at the end, ideas that Mike Akuda had given me, and it was called Star Trek Federation, and Mike Akuda even did a logo design. So I have this document that we made about this Star Trek series and how it would look going into the future. But here was the thing. It wasn't going to be dystopian. It was just going to be different. And the whole point of the show, the whole idea of the show, was all about the importance of Federation. And it was not so much that the Federation needed to be rebuilt as much as it needed to be maintained. And my idea was, ultimately, I was thinking about America. You know, America with our aging infrastructure, and the fact that we're sort of moving away from the social constructs that we have, that healthcare, and as it turns into more of a for-profit thing. What about the people? What about the American dream? And the idea behind Star Trek Federation was that, how are we going to both world build, nation build, and in Star Trek terms, rebuild the Federation? So you can read this document. It was tweeted out. Trek Core, actually Trek Movie, did an article. They were back in 2011. They did an article about all these different versions of unmade Star Trek properties, and they chose to focus on Star Trek Federation. So we have this document that Jeffrey Thorne wrote, and we were gonna pitch it. We were gonna pitch it to Paramount. And this was again around the time for the bifurcation between Paramount and CBS. And what ended up happening was it was announced that J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot were taking over the Star Trek franchise, and they were going to eventually make, as we saw, Star Trek 09, Into Darkness, and Star Trek Beyond. So our document, which, by the way, only went through one draft, we never even had any notes. I mean, it was literally Jeff's ideas, based on my ideas, based on the conversation that Chris McQuarrie, Brian Singer, and I had over the sushi dinner. So this document exists. I want to say about a year ago, I'm not going to say who told me this, but I was told that, or maybe it was a year and a half ago, it was sometime during the first season of Discovery, somebody actually told me that they said, you know, your Star Trek Federation idea is being talked about somewhere in the Discovery, somewhere in wherever, and which, you know, why not? A cursory glance on the internet can find things. I mean, somebody probably brought up, you know, there was a couple of ideas for unmade Star Trek shows. There's also a million Star Trek novels to read. There's Star Trek comics to read. There are many ideas for Star Trek shows all over the place. Ours was but one pitch document. That's it. So when I saw that Star Trek Discovery was leaping 1,000 years into the future, I'm like, Huh. Well, I guess great minds think alike. Now, of course, as we saw, the trailer for Star Trek Discovery season 3 has dropped, and the one thing, again, it looks beautifully made. It still looks like that Michael Burnham is once again the most important person in the entire universe, which has always bothered me because the show is pitched as not being about a captain necessarily, but about somebody who was uh, lesser than a captain, and we were going to see that person's life. And how does a person who isn't the captain and who isn't like one of the captains or first officer, how does that person live? And I thought that was a really interesting way to approach Star Trek. Well, now, Michael Burnham's character, she's like, not only is she the most important Star Trek person or character on Star Trek Discovery, she's the most important woman in the universe, which is supremely annoying. And it doesn't look like they have fixed that or alleviated that in season 3. But look, do I think I'm going to lay this to rest? No, I don't think that our Star Trek Federation outline was ripped off. I think when you're working within the idea of Star Trek and you start seeing what works and what doesn't work, the idea of going so far forward allows you to not be constrained by the weight of canon as it currently exists. Star Trek Discovery, as this article, the reason I wanted to read this article about conservatism is Star Trek Discovery was hamstrung by supposedly being canonical Star Trek being made by people that could care less about canonical Star Trek and only about their Star Trek. So it was just weird. It never really gelled for me. But more importantly, what I think the real problem with Star Trek Discovery is for me, and it clearly is on display in the trailer for season 3, is that it's now completely turned into dystopian Star Trek. One of the great things about Star Trek is that ultimately it was an aspirational show. That the very stories it told, even at the height of the Dominion War, when the galaxy was being torn asunder by the encroaching Dominion, at the end of the day, you had people, even in Star Trek's darkest moments. I mean, when Sisko he condones murder to bring the Romulans into joining the fray. I mean, one of the great episodes of Star Trek, I can live with it. Ultimately, it was trying to show people, even in the midst of a war that was presumably costing billions of lives, that there is something aspirational about Star Trek. And here's another thing. Star Trek never had villains. Star Trek had antagonists. And there is a huge distinction. And ever since Star Trek 09 especially, we've had 3 movies with traditional, pretty one-dimensional villains. I mean, look no further than the portrayal of Khan Noonien Singh in Space Seed from the original first season of Star Trek. It is nuanced. It is interesting. There's a moment when Khan threatens to put to death members of the Enterprise crew. And even he gets frustrated when they seemingly would prefer death to serving him. He gets frustrated. Montalban's performance. Each of you will go in there. It's so useless. He doesn't want to kill anybody. He's been designed to be a certain way. And that's what made the original Star Trek series so great. And then, of course, all of that has been subverted by lesser writing. People that don't understand that even the original series is one of the greatest written science fiction media shows ever because it was written by novelists. I looked at what we saw with Star Trek Discovery. When they unfurl the Federation flag and it looks different from the Federation flag that's even in the logo for Star Trek Federation, clearly the show is about there is no more Federation. And they're going to be building a federation. I'm not saying that, I'll say great minds think alike. But our series proposal was Star Trek Federation, and the whole thing was about rebuilding the Federation, in the year 3000. But What I don't like about Star Trek Discovery is it has become a show that is only dystopian in nature. It's very difficult to write antagonists as opposed to writing your standard mustache twirling villains. It really is. It's a lot harder to do that. And Star Trek at its best, you think about, I mean, look, the Picard series, we've got evil Romulans, and I'm sure we've got Borg characters, and the Romulans are making Borgs or whatever it is. We don't know yet. But all of that, I'll go with that because it's one large story. And hey, you know, what better thing to do than bring back the Borg, which is what Brian Fuller originally talked about in the first place. And of course, as Kirsten Beyer would know, as an adjunct of her Voyager work, why not? I mean, that's what that she's she wrote 10 Voyager novels. That's a lot of pages of Star Trek. A lot of pages. That's a lot of Star Trek storytelling she's engaged in. But while Star Trek Discovery Season 3 looks great, once again, it's the Michael Burnham show with her friend, Michael Burnham and friends. But it looks to me to be very, very dystopian. And it looks to me whether we're now in a period of time. I feel like, in a way, as somebody who grew up in the 70s watching science fiction films, science fiction movies up until Star Wars came out, the 70s, even from the end of Planet of the Apes, especially the end of Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which has got the ultimate dystopian ending. Spoiler alert, Charlton Heston blows up the world at the end of Beneath the Planet of the Apes, if you haven't seen it. But I mean, it literally ends with Paul Frees saying, "Is now dead." You know, the planet is now dead. But I believe it was Paul Frees. But I didn't see anything really, a lot of aspirationality, is that a word, happening in the Star Trek Discovery Season 3 trailer. It looked like a lot of the same. There weren't a whole lot of big ideas. That there seemed to be a lot of bad guys, a lot of bad stuff was happening. And hey, the Discovery is going to ride in. It's the cavalry that's going to save the universe, which is fine. And again, I want it to be good, people. Maybe the third season of Discovery will be looked back upon by my ancestors at this time, like Next Generation. That's when Discovery really got good, was in season 3. And I don't have to worry anymore about Discovery. You know, as far as I'm concerned, going 1,000 years into the future, in a way, absolves Discovery of its horrible abuse of Star Trek canon, because they didn't come from the canonical Star Trek universe. By going into the future, who's to say where they come from? And the whole thing, I mean, I'll buy it. The only reason I could even turn Discovery on in the first place is because I'd convinced myself it was not canonical. It was not canonical Star Trek. But I will say this: they're sure spending a lot of money on it, you know, and it looks good, even if I don't understand why space is always blue. But anyway, I look at Star Trek Discovery, and I look, even Star Trek Picard, there were smiles. You know, I mean, there was on Golden Picard. You got a little bit, you got hugging, you got people who love each other, seeing each other again. That is aspirational. That's kind of nice to see. That's what I like to see. Yeah. So, I mean, the Picard trailer left me with a smile on my face. The the Star Trek Discovery trailer left me shaking my head. But hey, isn't it great to be surprised? I think so. I hope so, because I really do want to be surprised. Now, for a change of pace, Koba is here. Koba is, of course, our favorite simian from the Planet of the Apes prequel franchise. Koba says, "Greetings, Rob. I saw Joker recently, and honestly, I want to start by saying the acting was amazing. Joaquin Phoenix was amazing in the role. However, I hate that it was called Joker, because to me, that wasn't Joker. He wasn't playing the Joker to me. Call this film by any other name, and I would think it was great. Heck, it is a great movie, ruined by trying to be something it isn't. And that is a Joker movie. This movie has a clear message, and honestly, that's okay. Great art can still have clear messages. It makes people think about how we as a society treat and view the mentally ill. And if it was just a movie about that, I'd give it 10 out of 10. And good art should make you think. However, by calling the movie Joker, you're not telling the story of a poor man, a poor, ill man failed by society. You are telling the story of a man who becomes an inhuman monster. The Joker isn't meant to be a tragic character, but more of a horrific character. You are meant to be scared of the Joker, not pity him. And I did not fear this version of the Joker. Nicholson, Ledger, and heck, even Jared Leto made the character of Joker scary, while Phoenix made the Joker tragic. Even in the comics and cartoon, I never saw the Joker as tragic, not even the Killing Joke, which is a tragic story. Never made the Joker out to be a tragic character. The Joker was still scary, and the idea of him was scary. How one bad day could turn the average person into a hideous monster. So to put my review into perspective, this was an amazing movie, but it shouldn't have been about the Joker. Well, again, Koba, I want to thank you for that, because once again, you people don't let me down. The letters that you are writing me, the things that you're sending me, and the comments that are being left on these chats are I think they're terrific. And I really like hearing everybody's points of view. Here's another one. This comes from Christopher Collins. Hey, Robert, I was just thinking and talking to other Marvel fans online about Disney Plus. One thing that brought up was, even though you can watch all the Marvel or Star Wars films, we do not know if it will include the special features or behind the scenes, commentaries, and bloopers. You talk about physical media frequently. Question: with all these streaming services going on, in particular Disney Plus and CBS All Access, is there special features available now on those streaming services for movies and shows? And do you think Disney Plus will have the special features included on the movies and shows in the same way Disney Movie Rewards lets you when you buy the digital copy or Disney movie? Will this factor change whether people decide to go completely onto streaming services versus buying physical media? Christopher Collins. Well, Christopher, great question. Here's the thing. Unfortunately, the special features, while originally pioneered, I think, by Criterion in the 80s on their Laserdiscs, beginning with Citizen Kane and King Kong, which is the first discs that Criterion released in the mid-80s, I think in 84, actually. As I've told people many, many times, and I've told this story before, when Superman Returns came out on home video, we originally were going to do 6 hours of special features. And I'd certainly shot enough, and it was going to be a 3-disc set. Now, most home video releases are finished. They're usually due with all the special features the day the movie actually gets released in theaters, because it takes that long for authoring and things like that. We found out that because of Walmart, now this is back in 2006, because Walmart basically sold 45% of all of the physical media in the world. Walmart said, we don't want a 3-disc set. We'll have a 2-disc set, and then we'll have a movie-only or vanilla release of Superman Returns. I found out, and the sales figures bear this out, that of all of the copies of Superman Returns that were, and regardless of what you think about the movie, I'm just dealing with the realities of the sale of physical media of Superman Returns. The vanilla-only disc of Superman Returns outsold the 2-disc special edition 8-2. Only 20% of the people that bought Superman Returns bought the special edition disc. Now, that's because, and the studios eventually found this out, only 20% of the people buying physical media even cared about special features. Most people don't. Now, that's not to say, I know, we're all imagination connoisseurs here. We all love special features. That's why, you're watching this channel. And I understand that. I get that. But so I'm not trying to say personally that there's anything wrong with you or my other fellow imagination connoisseurs that still, this is the Steelbook of the 4K Shining. I mean, who doesn't want to have this? I'd have this. The Arrow set, the Mario Bava set, the Macabre Visions, the films of Mario Bava, the UK set from Arrow. Who doesn't want this? Black Sunday, look at this. It comes in with a book. I mean, there's some great physical media being put out, but let's face it, people, most people aren't buying it. The physical media, I keep watching. There's another channel I watch, this guy, I forget his channel, but he's always talking about home video, and he considers himself a collector, as I do. I've been collecting physical media for 39 years. The fact is, physical media is dying. It is dying. Physical media is still making $4 billion a year. That is true. But every year it plummets. It plummeted 14% in 2018. We don't know how much it's plummeted. 4K, people are still buying 4K discs. I know I do. Who doesn't want to buy 4K discs? I mean, come on. 4K discs rule. The Quatermass movies I was talking about a couple weeks ago. I love physical media. If you have a home theater system, currently the best way to watch 4K movies is with discs. Streams are not quite there yet. The pipelines aren't big enough. The pipelines are getting bigger every day. Eventually, in 10 years, even I admit, some Hunt for Red October is on Netflix. I'm like, do I want to get up and get my UK 4K disc of Hunt for Red October and put it in my player when I can just hit click and watch it? Disney Plus, they have a Star Wars page. If I want to zip around and just watch all the space battle scenes, it's really easy to do. As much as I love physical media, and I love physical media, I love me some. For 15 years, I produced special features, and it kills me. There's a guy who writes me all the time on Facebook because we did a special feature called The Trek Not Taken, and it was only released as a Best Buy exclusive for the Blu-rays. Now, he has told me that this actually appeared in one of the German releases for Next Generation. But we did this piece. I did this piece. I created this piece. I edited this piece, found the footage, put it together, did the interviews. It's a 15-minute piece about how they almost tried to make CG special effects for the original Next Generation. And you see footage that had never been, we uncovered it on a tape. No one had ever seen it. So we did this piece. And here, it's the restoration of Star Trek in 2K and HD. And we give this piece that was finished in HD to Best Buy, and they only make it available as a standard def download. I'm like, what? We did a piece in HD, and you're only going to put it available as a standard def download? Now you can't get it at all. It's a 15-minute piece that I did called The Trek Not Taken. I mean, I have it, but apparently it's on one of the discs. But I say that because physical media is going away. And it's not just the physical media. It'll eventually be who's going to make players. Who's going to make the players? I mean, I still want to be able to buy my $1,000 Elite, Pioneer Elite, or Panasonic Elite players. Oppo, my favorite Oppo was my favorite disc player manufacturer. They discontinued making discs last year. Machines, their beautiful 4K player gone. How long is that going to last? And ultimately, it's too bad because the way that streaming services are going to look at things is the same way that anybody looks at anything. Streaming services know exactly who watched what and how many times. And do you think that if, the great Quatermass trilogy, do you think that these are going to be just huge successes on whatever streaming service they wind up on? Probably not. And eventually people are going to be like, why do we have to have the Quatermass movies on? Nobody's watching them. So the one thing that I've always felt about physical media is I've collected these movies that are favorites of mine. I'm still waiting to buy the 1953 War of the Worlds in 4K on disc. You can't get it. You can only download it. Why? It's a beautiful movie. But then if I download it and look at it, is that so bad? I mean, I've been collecting physical media for 39 years. I will not be on the planet Earth for 39 more years. So I've been buying physical media longer than I have left to live on planet Earth. I've often said to people, I'm like, you know what? If I were to sit down and watch one of my discs every day, 7 days a week, 365 days, I mean, it would take me quite a while to get through my entire collection. There are discs I know I will probably never watch in my lifetime before I am worm food, and I still buy them. I buy them out of habit. I buy them after need. I buy them because of addiction. And there's less and less. It's great. There's less and less stuff to buy. But how many times have I owned The Shining? Let's see. I've owned The Shining on VHS. I've owned The Shining on Laserdisc. I've owned The Shining on DVD. I've owned how many versions of The Shining? I remember when it came out, I don't know if it was on Blu-ray. It wasn't in the right aspect ratio. Now it's on 4K. I will never buy The Shining again. I take solace in the fact that this Best Buy Steelbook is the last time I will ever buy Stanley Kubrick's The Shining on disc. And how many times have I watched it? I probably bought this disc more times than I've watched the movie on physical media. So unfortunately, the original question you asked is, let's hope that physical media, let's hope all of the special features, the great special features. I've worked on discs like the Fantasia Anthology on DVD, where our own special features were later supplanted by other people's special features covering the same material on high-def releases of Disney titles. So I've watched my own special features be phased out by newer, slicker ones, because when we did our special features in 2000 for Fantasia 99-2000, they were in standard def. I've seen my own work replaced. It's crazy. I don't know what that means, but it means something. Yeah. So I think whether they put special features on, I think they should. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't. I think it's free programming. It's free programming. Why wouldn't they? Garon Gilham says, I find the premise of Discovery Season 3 interesting. Shockingly, I did too. That's why I wrote it in a proposal for a different kind of a Star Trek show in 2005. Let's go that far into the future, see what happens. So I'm right there with you. This next letter comes from Mark C. Mark Jure, who is a longtime contributor here, a self-described member of the Fandom Menace, and a toxic fan. I don't think he's really that toxic, though. I've appreciated his dealings here on the channel, and I really like when he contributes. He's been very generous, contributing both monetarily, but most of all with his ideas. And here's more. Greetings, Rob. After Friday's review of The Joker, I wanted to give you my take on the film. Beware some slight spoilers ahead. Normally, your taste in film runs parallel to mine. After my screening, I must say, your talk that Arthur isn't very smart and not a mastermind doesn't hold water with me. My relationship with the Joker character goes back to the famous Neil Adams issue of Batman. As a criminal mastermind, he's actually not been that smart. He keeps getting caught. The Joker I know is chaos incarnate. He might kiss you because of the color of your shoes, or he might kill you for the same reason. As depicted in The Killing Joke, he has an origin of a failed comic who had one really bad day. The Joker, at the time of his origin, wasn't a smart character either. He was a goof after bombing as a comedian. He lost his pregnant wife, gets roped into a heist job wearing a red hood that gets stuck on his head, and trips over his cape. Only over time did he start putting together his schemes and scams as depicted at the end of the book. Over the years, his appearances are a bit scatterbrained. Sometimes he's just chaos, and others he attempts to be a mastermind, usually to no avail. With the advent of 2008's Dark Knight, we got a different Joker than we've ever seen. Despite being caught, despite the ferry boats not blowing each other up, the Joker won. He killed Rachel, put Batman on the run and into retirement, and worst of all, Gotham lost its White Knight in Harvey Dent. Not only was he killed, but his, as well as Gordon's legacy, was tarnished. Then there's Scott Snyder's Death of the Family. Here, the Joker is again believed dead by the end of the story, but his plan to split up the Bat family actually worked. This idea that the villain can win their objective is very post-9/11 cynical takes on heroes and villains. What we see here in the new film is a back-to-basics, chaos incarnate Joker. While he may become the criminal mastermind, this is simply a protagonist's descent into madness, not quite the birth of the antagonist. We are dealing with an Arthur Fleck whose mind has been numbed due to meds, and then dealing with the confusion of withdrawal. There is also something to be said about the death of dumb old Arthur Fleck and his rebirth as the Joker. This happens just as someone else, who will become very important to Joker, is also reborn after a tragedy. I understand what you were missing. That said, this movie ends is just short of the character's journey you were looking for. Add to that, the idea of the Joker being a criminal mastermind is actually a very recent one and not necessarily indicative of the agent of chaos that I grew up with. Remember, always put on a smile. Mark C. Well, see again. Another great letter about a response to the Joker. I didn't necessarily. I think everything Mark is saying is bang on here. I totally agree with him. It doesn't make me like the film more, though. I mean, at the end of the day, I said it was a beautifully made movie, but I didn't. I mean, I know where he's coming from, but I don't even think that it wasn't even that Arthur Fleck. See, if I had made the Joker movie, I think what I would have done is the Joker wanted to be a comedian. We don't know why, what brought him there. And his whole idea of like he would laugh inappropriately. It was a physical condition, obviously played off into the idea that he wanted to be a comedian. That had been obviously put forth by Alan Moore, all of those things. But by the end of the film, you have a lot of stuff. I don't want getting into spoiler territory. Let's just say the Joker becomes an icon, an image, something larger than him. And there was something really interesting happening there, but it wasn't because of Arthur Fleck's character. I felt that Arthur Fleck's character, and when you get to the end of the movie, it's questionable as to what's going on. There's a moment at the very end with one emergency vehicle being driven by one of Joker's acolytes, I guess, that brings into question the whole end of the film. But I wanted to see more. I wanted to see the birth of a proactive villain who I thought was going on to do something more. And yes, they insinuate at the end of the movie, it happens off screen, but they clearly tell you I think it's the final shot in the movie, that I got the idea that, well, I don't want to, again, I can't get that much into spoiler territory, but I just wasn't satisfied. I wasn't satisfied by the whole thing, but I think that your reading of the film is definitely spot on. I think it's definitely spot on. Absolutely, I do. I just don't necessarily agree that makes the movie good. So, yeah. Robert Perez says, I'm seeing Joker tonight, and I just wanted to say, hi, may the force be with you. Well, Robert, thanks for supporting the channel. I very much appreciate that from you. This next one comes from it's a link, so I'll have to go back and deal with that. I'll put that on the description of the chat. This is another one from Mark C. I think he sent this one in first, but I'm gonna read it anyway because it's good. Greetings, Rob. After collecting the blue of my eyes from the back of my head, after listening to you read the Joker, I did read an op-ed about the Joker that I found on Vox. Now, a lot of people, it's very funny. I mean, I jump around the internet and I read stuff from all over the place. Right-wing sites, left-wing sites, all different kinds of sites. It's just what I find interesting. I'm constantly jumping around the web looking for stuff. I mean, I don't think I've ever read anything from the Mary Sue, because I think if I ever got there, you'd have to either pluck out my eyeballs with a spoon. But one never knows. I have shared things from the Mary Sue in the past, but I do jump around all over the place. So I am looking for stuff. Anyway, so I did read a letter about toxic fandom and things like that from Vox. So here it goes. This is also Mark C. again. After collecting the blue of my eyes from the back of my head, after listening to you read the Joker op-ed from Vox, as a member of toxic fandom and the fandom menace, I have listened to anything being said about the film. And believe it or not, it's been very little. Comments have pretty much been relegated to looks cool, can't wait to see it. And 99% of what this article spews, in my opinion, is manufactured hysteria. At no point in time did I hear anyone declare that the Joker movie is a touchstone where fans are drawing a line in the sand. I also have a real hard time believing this person ever received death threats of any kind. Why? 3 reasons. Vox is the kind of rag that exists to serve an echo chamber crowd. Yeah, but on the internet, what sites aren't? 2, we seem to live in a culture that celebrates victimhood to the point many have simply manufactured stories. I believe that's true too, actually. And 3rd, again, this is Vox, and nobody knows who the hell this person is or cares. Don't kid yourself. Articles like this are very political. As I mentioned, how Rotten Tomatoes downvoted Chappelle's routine and Rambo for going against the woke narrative, Joker seems to be enjoying a smear campaign from certain members within the media that doesn't approve of the film for not playing into that narrative as well. Both the media and the tech world are both suppressing free speech and individual thought. Whistleblowers from Google, Facebook, and even Pinterest have gone out stating outright that these companies are actively suppressing conservative ideas and values in an effort to affect the 2020 election. Sounds like a Mel Gibson level conspiracy theory? Yeah. But when you talk about cancel culture, these people are one and the same. We are being manipulated. So, Mark, you're saying that we're only being manipulated by the left? Look, I think we're being manipulated all the time by all kinds of forces that have their own interests and their own agenda. We one of the things that we're going to have to evolve through, and we're going to spend the next, well, at least the next however long I have left on this planet, we are going to be dealing and grappling with social media. We are going to be dealing with, look, as deep fake videos and even what's in front of our eyes can no longer be trusted. The idea that we're being manipulated all the time by forces beyond us, we're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to deal with it. We just have to understand that's happening. I just hope that perhaps at the end of the day, it's always, and it's either about money and the power, and when you're in power, you get more money. And what is money good for? So you can live in the lap of luxury, so you can build weird sex dungeons on an island like Jeffrey Epstein and abuse people. I want to know what we're going to do to make, say, the Star Trek future possible. You know, all this echo chamber talk and all of this, everyone's backbiting and yelling and complaining and bitching and moaning. You know, I just saw the other day that I think that was a young kid from, I want to say he was from Holland or some Scandinavian country, figured out how to make a machine that can take the plastics out of the ocean. And they've actually started to make it work. You know, I want to know, what are we going to do to protect the biosphere of this planet? Not by granting drilling rights or whatever, but actually getting, not bitching about whether climate science is correct or anything like that. How about just not spewing particulate matter into the atmosphere? I mean, why not? I've said before, do you leave your kitchen 10% dirty? I guess college students might, but I mean, you don't. You clean up your kitchen. So where's a concerted effort just to clean up our environment? Our own government, the Trump administration, keeps rescinding environmental protections. That's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. For economic reasons? Well, that's great. Well, you know, we can economically run ourselves into the grave. When it comes to manipulating our points of view, it's happening every day, all the time. Whether it's advertising, whether it's, I mean, look, Hot Toys manipulates me. They drop a spread. Hey, Mandalorian figure is up for pre-order. It comes out in October of 2020. I look at these pictures. I am manipulated, man. I look at that Mandalorian figure and I feel a yearning. I feel a need. I feel like I start jonesing like a heroin addict. Like, I look at these pictures. They're manipulating me, man. They're making me want to buy this Mandalorian figure. We're being manipulated all the time by everybody. What I really like to see, though, is the direction of making the world a better place. I know it's a highfalutin ideal. It's sort of silly. I sound very kumbaya, but at the end of the day, I just want to be able to breathe clean air and drink fresh water. We don't even have that in Flint, Michigan. You know, that's really where we're going to be at, because it doesn't matter how rich you are if you're sitting on a planet that's too hot, where there's millions of people moving in from the destroyed coastal regions, and we have no more food. So it doesn't matter how rich we all are. You know, you can build your emergency bunker in New Zealand with all of your wealth, and you're going to live there for how long? You know, hopefully physical media hasn't gone away, so you'll have something to watch, because we won't have streaming anymore. I don't know. Anyway, going off on a tangent. Don't mean to go. It's Sunday. The Seahawks already won Thursday night. It was amazing. Tiberius Monk 84 says, I dug the new Picard trailer, but have written off Discovery as the Orville is a superior show. Will we ever have a good Star Trek show again? Live long and prosper. Well, Tiberius Monk, I think Picard, you know, I'm going to say it. I'm going to be positive. I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer. I am excited for Picard. You know, I get to see Seven of Nine and Riker and Troy and Data, and I get to see the Romulan ship from Balance of Terror not firing its plasma weapon. How come the plasma weapon in Balance of Terror, one of the coolest depictions of a weapon in space ever, how come we never get to see that again? Why are they always firing beam weapons? I want to see that plasma weapon, man. Come on. Make it happen. Brian Ang is here. Brian Ang, quick letter. Brian's a old school member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Brian says, in your review of Joker, you said kids shouldn't see it. And then less than a half an hour later, you said kids should see it. Can you elaborate? Yes, I don't think young kids should see the Joker. I don't. And I think if kids do have a certain level of maturity, I mean, I certainly did watching Clockwork Orange at 13. I was inquisitive. I was well-read. I knew what I was getting myself into. People should see it. But really, I think that it's up to parents to decide. I think Joker is really the kind of movie that requires a little parental guidance. That's what I think. And if you have parental guidance, well, maybe then it's better. I don't know. Dieter Bastian is here. Dieter Bastian from Deutschland. Dieter Bastian, one of my favorite members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. You guys are all my favorites, but Dieter, again, participates a lot. Thanks for supporting the channel, sir. Even sent me a Blu-ray. Dieter says, hello, Rob. Oh, I just came back from my theater. Gemini Man didn't go any deeper than into what the trailer was showing, and considering high frame rate, ugly and beautiful at the same time, it did have that video look. 7.5 out of 10. For those of you who don't know, Ong Lee's new movie, Gemini Man, based on a very old script that's been floating around for the better part of 2 decades around Hollywood, has Will Smith famously playing himself today and his younger self from 30 years ago, fighting against one another. Ong Lee, one of our great directors, one of my favorite movies of the last, I think it was 20 years, The Ice Storm. Might have been before that. Man, do I love The Ice Storm. Big Ong Lee fan. He was trying a big experiment, high frame rate, groundbreaking effects, but apparently the script has let the film down. It is not doing well. I'm still going to go see it. Does bum me out, however. It does, in fact, bum me out, which it's like, God, why does it have to be that way? Why does it have to be that way? I don't know. Yeah, I wish that wasn't the case. So what are you going to do? I want it to be good. Again, I want every movie to be good. Movies are so hard to make. You want them to be good. And when they're not good, it bums me out. This letter, I love this letter. It comes from Ben Harsh. I think this is the first time Ben Harsh has written me. I can't tell you whether that's his real name or not. Ben Harsh, I hope you don't harsh my mellow today because I'm having a good Sunday. Anyway, Ben says, hi, Rob. I'm a big fan of the channel. It helps me get through my long commute from the office. I vaguely recall from back in the day, one of the Star Trek Next Generation movies did not perform well. Maybe it was Insurrection. Sorry, I can't remember. That would be Nemesis. Well, back then, just like today, whenever a film gets killed at the box office, there's usually a perfunctory media autopsy and a suspect is quickly named. I recall the suspect in this case of box office murder was the weekly Star Trek TV show. Apparently, the theory was that if people got the fix they needed from their hour of new TV Trek and didn't feel the urge to haul themselves off the couch and trudge down to the Cineplex. Since then, I thought this was a Hollywood lesson learned about managing the brand overlap of your TV shows and cinematic content. However, maybe not, because Disney is going to release The Mandalorian and Star Wars Episode 9 back-to-back. The Mandalorian debuts on November 12th and will stream for 8 weeks, which will take it to the end of December. Episode 9 hits theaters December 20th. Is Disney hoping The Mandalorian will prime the pump and get fans back in a Star Wars mood for Episode 9? Or is this a miscalculation on Disney's part and fans will get their Star Wars fix from The Mandalorian and don't need to go to the theater? I get the feeling that maybe they're hoping for the former, but the latter may be the actual outcome. A case of, do you want to hit the buffet? No, thanks. Just ate. Besides, that last trip to the Star Wars movie gave me the... It's an interesting scheduling choice on Disney's part, since the current suspect in the case of the dying Disney Star Wars brand is fatigue, with Iger even stating, "I just think that we might have put a little too much in the marketplace too fast." If that's so, then why schedule the two products back to back? For such an ingenious media company, I wish Disney would get their story straight. In any case, we'll know soon enough. Thanks, Rob, for everything you do. Ben Harsh of the Harsh Rules YouTube channel. Well, Ben, a good question. Look, I here's the thing about Star Wars. Everybody loves Star Wars. Everybody wants Star Wars to be good. There's nobody that doesn't like Star Wars. There's people that bitch and moan and complain about The Last Jedi. Hell, I bitched and moaned and complained about The Force Awakens. I thought it was not great. But I still love Star Wars. Empire Strikes Back is one of my favorite movies I ever saw. I think everybody loves Star Wars. Everybody just wants Star Wars to be great. And I'll tell you something. If there was great Star Wars every day, if there was, say, the Breaking Bad of Star Wars, or the Sopranos of Star Wars, or the marvelous Mrs. Maisel of Star Wars, whatever it was, if it was good, people would watch it. If there was if there was a channel that only had Star Wars sitcoms, Star Wars dramas, Star Wars reality shows, Star Wars, I don't know, home gardening network shows, gardening in the Star Wars universe. How do you grow plants on Coruscant? And it was good. I think people would watch Star Wars 24 hours a day. I think what Disney Plus is hoping, they are launching with Star Wars. It is still the biggest entertainment franchise on the planet. And if it's good, and it looks to be, by all accounts, The Mandalorian looks great. I mean, like I said, I see that Hot Toys Mandalorian figure drop. I'm like, oop, time to pre-order that on Triple Force Friday, or whatever the hell it is. Click. I mean, come on, people. Everybody wants Star Wars to be good. I do not think Disney is miscalculating at all. I think who isn't going to get Disney Plus for $7 to watch, actually $14 at least for the first 2 months to watch The Mandalorian? They got my money. That's not even a double Jameson on the rocks here in LA. I get 8 episodes, 8 hours of a Star Wars television show for $14. Sign me up. And you know what? After all 8 are over, whether I love it or not, I'm going to the theater and I'm going to see the rise of Skywalker, because that's what life is all about. And I, didn't like J.J. Abrams' Force Awakens. I thought he's basically painted himself into the biggest corner in the world, and for no other reason that I want to see how is he going to paint himself out. But I think the rise of Skywalker is at least going to be divisive, and boy, I can't imagine what's going to happen to the internet when that movie comes out. But we shall see. I want to thank you for the kind words about the channel. I think Disney is doing something. I think the strategy is great. Don't believe when people say things aren't good in the Star Wars universe. They're still making money hand over fist. This new letter comes from Mr. Jeffrey Mao. Jeffrey Mao is here. My man, Jeffrey Mao has written a lot. Actually, let's see. Willow Yang is here. Willow Yang says, where do you plan on watching The Irishman? I'm having trouble finding a theater in Vancouver that's screening it. Well, Willow, you should fly to LA and we'll all go together. I'll get a big group of people. We'll welcome Willow Yang to Los Angeles party, and we'll all go see The Irishman. I don't know where it's playing here in Los Angeles, but I'm going to go see it. I hope it's at the ArcLight. I don't know. I'm going to go see it in the best theater possible. Cannot wait. Really looking forward to it. By the way, speaking of Netflix, they dropped In the Tall Grass. My man, Detective Jim, said it wasn't as good as he said it was okay. I hope it's good. I really did not like In the Shadow of the Moon. I liked the first half of it, and then it turned into like ridiculousness. And by the time I got to the end, I wanted to punch the screen. I'm like, really? Anyway, I've heard the same thing about In the Tall Grass. I want it to be good, but I'm gonna watch it. But anyway, I don't know where The Irishman is playing. I haven't even looked, but now that you remind me, I'm going. But come to LA. It'll be a party. We'll go have a nice meal. I'll introduce you to some folks. Come be a guest on the show. You can sit right here, Willow Yang, and we'll go see The Irishman. We'll go to the beach. We'll go to like the Real Inn up in Malibu, which is like it's just a joint, but they got you sit at picnic tables. We'll get some great seafood. Not that you can't get great seafood in Vancouver, but come on. Stub McShave is here. Stub McShave says, do you think Harloff will join you on John Campia's show on certain days now that he's announced he's leaving Collider. I don't know. I know that John is very good friends with Christian. I know they probably are going to cook something up. Christian has a large following. Why not? As a matter of fact, by the way, if any of you are Schmodown viewers, can I just say, I don't even know how they do this, but if they have a manager voting for manager of the year, it's me. It's me. I'm the manager of the year on the Schmodown. I'm just going to say that. I want to win it. I'm in it to win it. Kaiser, Fred, whatever, Joe, Flew, whatever his name is, out of Frank, I don't know. It ain't him. It's me. Just anyway. So Stubble, I don't know what John's plans are. I would hope so. I like Christian. I think he's great. He's a handsome, strapping dude. He knows his stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised. If Christian shows up on one or more of John's shows. Or maybe they'll do a new show together. Who knows? Oh, Koba brought this up. I was glad somebody brought this up. Koba's here. He says, just saw the trailer for Lost in Space Season 2. Was wondering what your opinion of the reboot is. Are you excited for Season 2? Two things that we did not talk about today that I want to talk about. Lost in Space Season 2 and, oh yeah, the Expanse Season 4 trailer dropped. Both of them came out at New York Comic Con over the weekend. Both look great. While I didn't think it was genius, I quite enjoyed Season 1 of Netflix's Lost in Space. I thought it was good. I really enjoyed it. I for what it was, I enjoyed it. I really am looking forward to seeing where it goes in the second season. That trailer was great. I really liked all the actors in the show. I thought it was a very appealing show. And of course, the Expanse Season 4. Oh, yes. Bring it on, son. Looks good. Both look very good. The Expanse, I mean, first of all, that Expanse Season 4 trailer starts with John F. Kennedy. Anytime I listen to Kennedy's speeches, I wish I hadn't been, I wish I was born when he was alive, just to have been a kid. I would love to have been 8 years old and listened to him speak on TV. Of course, then I probably would have been like 10 or 11 and mourning his death, but it would have been nice to have seen him live. But I love his speeches. I love listening to JFK speak and hearing a speech over that Expanse Season 4 trailer. Immediately, I was getting teared up, not just because it looks badass. The great thing about the Expanse, if you want to know about the Expanse, the books are way ahead of the series. So, and it gets pretty bonkers, to be honest. And I really like that the Expanse it's never going to be more the same on that show. So very, very exciting. I'm very excited about both of the shows. All I know is that we're getting whether Star Trek is going to be good or not, we are seeing a lot of great sci-fi coming, and isn't that the case? Roberto Suarez says, what's the significance of Excalibur and Joker? Well, as everyone knows, maybe you don't know, there is a scene in Joker where you see a movie theater. And in outside the movie theater, there are a number of movie posters. There are a number of movie posters for Warner Brothers movies, such as Wolfen, such as Arthur, such as somebody mentioned Zorro the Gay Blade, which is a real movie, by the way. And of course, Excalibur. All of these movies were 1981. Well, if you remember Batman v Superman, when a certain group of people are walking away from a theater, they also cite Excalibur. They say that Excalibur is I believe, coming soon. That would be in Batman v Superman. So there are now two Batman-related films. I don't know if it was a nod. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just saying that, okay. All right. That's what I saw. I was like, that was very deliberate. I thought it was very deliberate. Somebody did not go, oh, you know what? They had an Excalibur reference in Batman v Superman too. Could not have been. But could just be an Easter egg. Might not mean anything. But to me, as an astute viewer, I watched it and I'm like, hey man, what's up? Why'd you do that? What about 1980 or 1982? Why 1981 specifically? You had two Warner Brothers movies set in the Batman universe, and you can't tell me Joker is not set in the Batman universe. Oh, yes, it is. And anyone who's seen it knows it is. Come on. It's not like it's subtle. It's in the Batman universe. Anyway, Jeffrey Mao, back to his letter. Greetings, Mr. Burnett, Grand Master of Fun and Wonder. Recently, Martin Scorsese was interviewed by Empire Magazine, and his remarks have been reprinted numerous times, specifically concerning his thoughts on comic book movies, such as those produced by Marvel, and why he disdains them and doesn't consider them to be cinema. He said, I quote, "I don't see them. I tried, but that's not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being." End quote. I will give Mr. Scorsese credit for having tried and for praising them for being well made. However, I do feel a little disappointment in that I feel that he redefined what cinema is to better justify his position without adding clarification to better explain himself. I think that article titles that reported on the interview that claim he meant to say that comic book movies weren't cinema at all may be misleading, though. If you read his words, he says it isn't the cinema of, but he doesn't say that it couldn't be the cinema of something else. The interviewer could have probed Scorsese to expand upon his response. There are many different kinds of cinema. There can be popcorn cinema, feel-good cinema, scary cinema, and the cinema that Scorsese specifically points out. Why all those different kinds of cinema can't be appreciated in different ways is something that I would like to ask him if I could. What I would ask him as well would be, why can't you enjoy different kinds of cinema? To follow up on your theme park analogy, well, I like going to theme parks, but I also like going to zoos and parks and museums. I get a different experience with each. I don't want to go to only theme parks or zoos or museums. I like going to them all, and it makes me more well-rounded. I get a better view of life and all there is to offer. So why can't it be that way with movies? Sometimes I think that we as movie fans think that all filmmakers are also a big fan of the films as we are. And while I'm sure all of them started out as such, otherwise they wouldn't get to make films to begin with, I don't necessarily know that all of them continue to watch films in the same way and in the same capacity as we do. I don't know if they can turn off their filmmaker brain and just watch them as fun or as a fan. I don't necessarily know that this thought is valid amongst all businesses and amongst all people. But for example, a lot of athletes are not fans of their own sport in that they watch the sport in their off time to keep up with it. They're so involved with playing, training, and preparing that they have no bandwidth left. When you're working in the business, I wonder if it takes some of the joy away from being able to be a fan of the business. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're quite the exception among people who work in the LA entertainment industry in terms of your fandom. Not everyone has your collection of toys, posters, and stuff, but I wonder if people who work at the studios in LA go home, do they watch TV, movies, or are they so done with it they want to do something else? Do people who work at Netflix go home and, well, Netflix? It's an interesting question, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Well, once again, Jeffrey Mao, a great letter, really interesting. Here's what I think Martin Scorsese was saying. I don't think he was saying that superhero movies aren't cinema, but superheroes are genre cinema. Just like, I mean, Martin Scorsese knows his movies. He knows genre cinema. And I think what he was responding to is, and I'm going to say this, I grew up with superheroes. I love superhero movies. I still read comic books. I mean, hell, come on. I mean, I'm not too far away. I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly doing something with comics. I've loved comics my whole life. But I also understand. I remember when I was in high school, I had this teacher. I had a crush on her. Her name was Carol Pankey. There was something. She was very intellectually beautiful. She was kind of cold, and she kind of reminded me of, I don't know who she reminded me of. I totally had a crush on her, and I was trying to get her to admit that comic books were a legitimate form of some kind of literature, and she was having none of it. And I gave her an issue of Moon Knight, and I want to say it was Moon Knight 14. It has an all-red cover. It's stained glass. It's about the character of Stained Glass Scarlet. She's sitting there with like a crossbow, and Moon Knight's kind of in the corner. But and she read it, and and admittedly, I was not as much up on my noir movies at the age I was probably 15 or 16 when I gave her this comic. And she said, yeah, this is a standard noir story. You know, it's not like it's groundbreaking or new. Well, for me, watching or seeing a this kind of a story being tackled in a comic book was new to me. And I gave it a lot of importance. And I was like, how can you, this is a important human story about human interaction in Pages of Moon Knight, drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz and written by Doug Mensch, and she wasn't going to give me the satisfaction. But I understood why. I mean, I got it. I think that, Martin Scorsese is a man who is a fan of Ingmar Bergman. Now, I think if you asked many fans of the MCU to sit down and watch Persona or Cries and Whispers or The Virgin Spring or The Seventh Seal, you would be hard pressed. And by the way, I am not trying. Please, if you are a Bergman fan, if you bought the Criterion Bergman box set and you also watch all the MCU movies, I am not talking about you. There's always exceptions. I'm one. I have lots of Bergman movies. I have the coffee table Taschen book about Bergman. I also have all the MCU films. So there are people like us out there. But whether it's Bergman, whether it's Andrei Tarkovsky, whether it's my beloved Michelangelo Antonioni, Wim Wenders' 5 Hour Until the End of the World. I don't know a lot of people that are going to watch Endgame and that are going to watch Infinity War and then turn around and watch the Ennui trilogy of La Notte, L'Avventura, and The Eclipse. I just don't. So I think that's what Scorsese was talking about. I mean, it's like superhero movies to him. And let's face it, superhero movies, as evidenced in the MCU, are not exactly nuanced, and we all have to admit, look at the gamut, the wide gamut that superhero movies can be. And remember, Scorsese was going to make Joker at one point or be producing it. So if you were to take a look at, say, Superman the movie, Tim Burton's Batman, X-Men, Spider-Man 2, Logan, Infinity War and Endgame, and now Joker, you would watch those movies. That is a wide variety of cinema, and it's evolving and it's changing, and things are happening. But if all you were watching was the 23 MCU films, plot-wise, while they have different nuances, they're very similar. And it's not like you're getting into the depths of the human psyche the way you would get into and say something like Persona, Bergman's Persona. Or, I mean, who would have thought that there ever would have been? I mean, what would be really interesting is to see Scorsese's commentary about Joker. But I don't necessarily. Everyone wants to jump all over. Like, it's what I don't like is like, ooh, it's a gotcha. Rather than try and understand what Scorsese was trying to say, everyone's like, how can he not like superhero movies? That's terrible. He's like insulting me personally because I do. Look, I mean, look at the kind of movies the guy's made. As I've said, I think the first hour of Casino is one of the most tour de force pieces of filmmaking in the modern age. But if you go back and you look at everything he's made, he started out in genre movies, working for Roger Corman, and it's he gets it. It's just when all of the press and all of the box office and is being sucked up by these movies, he's like, look, cinema is about how do we as human beings relate to one another. And that's what he's trying to tell stories about. When you're hearing all about superhero movies, I get it. I understand. There is a fanciful thing about superheroes. Joker and Logan have elevated that discourse, but really, and I'll say it, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is about the child in all of us. It's not like you're going to watch the MCU and expect to have all the secrets of the universe opened up for you. It's just a different experience. Martin Scorsese is all about that kind of human interaction. Like, I think that it's a lot harder. And here's the example. Martin Scorsese is making a point that I think he would love it if every single person that watched every MCU, all 23 movies in the MCU, would sit down and watch a Tarkovsky movie, would watch an Antonioni movie, would watch Kurosawa or even Hitchcock or any of the great filmmakers, Ozu, whoever it is. But they're not doing that. They're not. They're the people that live on a steady diet of what we imagination connoisseurs live on. They're not going back and eating, I guess, the equivalent I don't think this way, but if you're going to watch Francois Truffaut's The 400 Blows, I guess that's sort of the equivalent of eating your vegetables. And I think that's what he was talking about, and I think that there's a lot of fans of the MCU that are not going back and looking into the classics or looking at Bergman. And he's right. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to admit that that's the case. I don't know a lot of people that live on a steady diet of Back to the Future and Star Wars and Terminator and Star Trek and the MCU that are also going back and watching, Sunset Boulevard as much as they should, or one of my favorite movies, All About Eve, or better yet, watch All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard on a endless double bill watch them once a week, And so that's all I think he's saying, and everybody's getting all upset about it. But I don't think that they have to, He was just making a comment, and everybody's getting mad about it, and I don't think that they should. I really don't. But I understand where he's coming from, but there's no reason to get mad at Marty. I mean, the guy, I think The Irishman's going to win Best Picture this year. I think it's going to win Best Picture, and I think he's probably going to win Best Director. I really do. I really believe that. Stubble McShave says that Game of Thrones used sex scenes for exposition. Now, I know, Stubble, you might think that's cheeky, and everyone's laughing like, oh, what a left turn. I agree. I think sex scenes in movies can grind them, so to speak, to a halt. I like it when sex scenes, as in the way people are having sex, advances the plot. Otherwise, it's like, okay, now it's time for some sexy time. So we're not, we're gonna watch, get a little boom, chicka bow, bow, and get our blood up. But when you see sex scenes used the way, say, Paul Verhoeven used them in Basic Instinct, where it opens with this very sexy scene that ends with not necessarily an orgasm, at least for the guy, but with somebody plunging an ice pick into the face of their sex partner, then it sets up later in the movie for an incredibly suspenseful sex scene, wondering, is this person also going to get an ice pick to the face? I do think in non-pornographic movies, when sex scenes are employed well, they do advance the plot. I think that happened a lot in Game of Thrones. I think, but that's not to say, Stubble, that as a connoisseur of boobies, my whole life since I was very young, there's a lot of boobies in there just to elicit a physiological response and get people to say, "Oh my God, there were so many boobies last night on Game of Thrones." I mean, they did use it. There's a lot of scenes early on, especially in brothels and Littlefinger. I'm like, oh, they're going to one of Littlefinger's establishments. All right. There's a lot of that too. And let's face it, there's a lot of exploitation movies that use sex with no exposition. It's just like, look at all these naked people. Hammer horror. I mean, I grew up watching Hammer horror movies, and they always had great boobies in them. And it wasn't because they were trying to advance the plot. This is a great show today. The Doctor 1701A says, watched Sequest DSV again. Interesting how they thought the future 2018 might be. What sci-fi thing astonishes you because it is now reality? You know what? iPhones, man. I am blown away. I am blown away that we carry around supercomputers in our pockets where you can talk to anybody on the planet Earth via video phone or whatever. I think it's amazing. That's what is Black Mirror. When you watch Black Mirror, one of the first things when I first found Black Mirror, I was watching it via the internet because it was only on in Britain. And the first thing I asked was, what is the Black Mirror? And the Black Mirror is it's the empty screens that we carry around with us. When we turn off all of our screens, they're black. When we turn them on, it's amazing. And I think that smartphones, cell phones, iPhones, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing that we have them. And who would have thought? Certainly Stanley Kubrick would have been blown away by them. Amazing. Chris Wrigglesworth is here today. Sent me a letter. Dear Rob, hope all is well. I know you and many others in the Post-Geek Singularity community are probably getting tired of hearing how much many imagination connoisseurs hate The Last Jedi. I've tried to refrain from spilling my guts on the subject, and with the exception of some scattered comments in a few chats, I think I've done fairly well. But please read on, as this is not one of those letters. One thing that I truly love about this community you've built, listen, I didn't build it. I mean, I just found the real estate and opened the door. You guys have built it. Everybody who chose to come to the party every single day as we're all here together. You know, I'm just the guy walking around with the drinks. I'm just the host. I'm the host. But the party's in the live chat room. The party is with you guys. But anyway, one thing that I truly love about this community you've built is that even though I agree with about 95% of what you and the others have to say, I truly enjoy hearing different or dissenting views and opinions. That you offer them is a rarity that is much appreciated. Even if I disagree and my mind isn't changed, discourse that is well presented, addresses issues or content without attacking people, still allows me to gain insight and learn from it. The dead horse of I Hate the Last Jedi has been beaten, buried, and dug up to be beaten some more. It would not behoove me to state what I don't like, as my feelings have already been echoed by countless others in multiple forms of media since the film's release. Let's just say that I like that Luke's story arc, which I know you found interesting, puts me firmly on the side of I really don't like it. And I'll leave it at that. That being said, I thought it might be fun to look at this extremely divisive movie from a slightly different angle. As kids, we were often told if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. So, here's what I thought was well done or worked in The Last Jedi. The visuals. Rian Johnson crafted a visually stunning movie. With the aid of Steve Yedlin's cinematography, there are very few shots that are anything less than eye candy. Likewise, the special and visual effects were also top-notch. The sound. I can't praise John Williams' score, the sound editing, or mixing enough. I also think the decision to use silence during the light speed crash was extremely effective. I love that. The use of previously unexplored force powers. Here we see things that may have been touched on in the expanded universe or lesser canon brought squarely into main canon. Things like Luke's force projection, Yoda's ability to interact with the physical world, force Skyping, which seems to be a combination of sensing thoughts and presence combined with force projection, force teleportation, the raindrop, surviving in space. I'm still having a hard time with that one, but what do I know? I'm not a Jedi. And the ability to cut oneself off from the force. The acting. Regardless of my feeling on most of the character arcs, I still have to give props to the stellar job done by all the actors. Standouts for me were Oscar Isaac, Kelly Marie Tran, Adam Driver, and mostly Mark Hamill. To return to the role he hadn't done in over 30 years and give the performance he did, even though fundamentally disagreeing with the path the character took, demonstrated true thespian skill. I'll stop there, as I know my letters can get lengthy. Instead, I will conclude that yes, even for someone like me who truly walked out of the theater feeling gut-punched and let down, there are still things that can be liked about the film. I wouldn't even be opposed to Rian Johnson directing future Star Wars movies, but would prefer the writing to be left to others with oversight from the Lucasfilm Story Group. While The Last Jedi probably won't grace my Blu-ray player very often, I hold hope for two things to happen. The first is for Rise of Skywalker to stick the landing. If J.J. Abrams can give us something that will smooth over the divide within fandom, he would accomplish a task even more monumental than bringing Star Wars back to the big screen. I certainly don't envy the job he has in front of him. Second is something I said early after The Last Jedi's release, that my feelings about it may change even drastically based on what happens in The Rise of Skywalker. Perhaps we were being set up for a bigger payoff in the conclusion. So, to quote Red at the end of Shawshank Redemption, which just celebrated its 25th anniversary, I hope. Thanks for reading, and may the force be with you, Chris. Well, first of all, Chris, thanks for the kind words about the community we're building here. Look, I try and find things I don't always agree with. It's all about discussion. It's all about keeping that discussion going. And I think this community is very, very good at that, as evidenced by the letters people send me. And as long as people, again, my mission statement or my mandate is people should be respectful. And if you want to send in something that's contrarian to something that I've said, great. And look, I don't think of myself as some great intellect. I'm just here talking about stuff that I love, and you guys are listening to me. I mean, if that's it, I'm just one guy with a voice, and there's a lot of people out there that I like hearing your voices being reflected back at me and getting these letters and getting these chats and keeping this conversation going. I look, sometimes I go back and I look at the live chat stream, which you guys are not even talking about what I'm reading or whatever. And I love that. I love that you're talking about all kinds of different things. People are trying to hook up with Vesna or Willow. I'm like, what about this important topic about Star Trek Discovery? What about that? No, I think it's great. And I want to thank you for that letter. And you know what? I think, Chris, you bring up an important point. There's something you can find to like about most movies, even god-awful ones. And I do try and find those things. I do. I mean, for me, it basically always comes back to the story that's being told. Do I like the story that's being told? Even if it's done with a low budget and maybe not the best actors or whatever, if the story is good or the writing, if there's an attempt made to tell a good story, even if the execution is less than desirable, I'll find something to like about it. Usually, yes, I will. Yeah. Let's see. I think, ladies and gentlemen, kind folks and all of you great people and members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, I am going to bring this chat, ladies and gentlemen, gentle people, to an end. That's right. I'm going to end this chat. This was Robservations number 241. I'm your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I think I was remiss in this chat to remind you all that this program is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com, you, after buying any of their great products, can punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity and get 20% off your order. I want to thank Lucky Tiger for continuing to sponsor these. I'm going to have another Living the Lucky Tiger Life dropping probably tomorrow. Check that out because they're fun to do. I like doing that. I want to thank all of my great moderators. I want to thank Detective Jim. I want to thank Terry, the Sheriff of Nottingham. I want to thank the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden, who is in the midst of his re-election campaign to become Mayor of Riverdale, Iowa for another term. That's exciting. Going to get out to those polls if you are in November and live in Riverdale, Iowa. If anybody who's in there can vote Mike. And then, of course, Greg Smith, old friend of mine who's building a 1-to-1 scale snow speeder for the Emerald City Comic-Con next year. That's very, very exciting. So I want to thank everybody here. I'm sorry yesterday I missed James Bond Day. I didn't do a show. I was working on stuff, so that was a bummer. But anyway, yesterday was James Bond Day. They dropped a poster for No Time to Die, which I got to say, as another friend of mine named Rob put it, I got into movie poster advertising. I became a graphic designer because the James Bond posters of the 1960s, and using a Love Boat font as they have on this new poster, little disappointing. I just hope more thought was put into the film itself than the ad campaign. Can't wait to see the trailer, though. We're supposed to get a trailer, and I can't wait. I'm sitting on pins and needles to see that trailer. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here. If you like these chats, again, please like, please subscribe, please tell your friends, please write letters. Go to the website, theburnettwork.net. You can send me a 3-word movie review. Those are always fun. If you want to share your action figure collections, books, movies, whatever things you've made, artwork you've done, whatever it may be, we have the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery, which you can add to on the website. Please do that. And again, everybody that supports the channel through super chats and also through signing up at the website, and my patrons on Patreon, even though I'm trying to phase that out, I still want to thank everybody for doing that. It's fantastic. And this will be the end of Robservations, the show about something, Robservations number 241. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I'm going to say go Seahawks, even though they're not playing today, but they sure played a great game Thursday night, did they not? They did. Well, as always, have a better day.